So let's continue with tutorial 3.2.1. In this tutorial, we are going to discuss in detail about data privacy and security risks that are associated with using generative AI. Briefly, we have already understood in the previous tutorial about these risks. Let's understand all of these in detail. Now, if we talk about the Gen AI, why the data privacy and security risks are there? Because Gen AI processes very large volume of data, and that data often might include sensitive and personal identifiable information. So identifiable information, which is known as PIIs, and that raises the data privacy concerns. For example, if for example personal information or sensitive information gets exposed, it might have unintentional data exposure, lack of control over data usage, or compliance risk, right? So because of the large processing of this type of personal and sensitive information, there are data privacy concerns. Then Gen AI also raises privacy and security concerns in testing. For example, if we talk about the test environment, test data might include user credentials, financial records, or health information if you have worked in the financial industry, in banking. So you have the production data, for example, just in case you have the generative AI model, even if it is on premise and it is hooked to a existing database which has cloned the production data and is not masked properly. So the Gen AI might leak that information when you are using that capability or generative AI to get the test data, the financial data, the customer data. It might get you the real financial data and user credentials, which is a big security risk. And any misuse or exposure of this data can lead to loss of trust in that banking, in the compliance issues. Government might have a lot of compliance and regulatory issues that the organization might get into. As a tester, you should treat Gen AI outputs with utmost care so that you are not posing, or whatever output you are getting, you make sure that you actually cross-check it before actually using it either in the test environment or in the actual testing or pushing it further. So that's very important aspect to understand why the security risk, the data privacy risk, and how as a tester you will handle these. So if we talk about the data exposure, unintentional data exposure, Gen AI may accidentally reveal sensitive information in outputs. How? Because generated test case might include the real customer's email address. If you have the model and that model has access to your internal database, it might fetch the information and might pick the real customer email or customer address or any sensitive information of the customer and provide you that data into the test case. Gen AI output exposes internal API keys in the test script. That is also possible. Mitigation, what you should do for mitigating this, making sure that you use synthetic or anonymized test data, right? Whenever you are using even the on-prem model, you make sure that the model uses anonymized and synthetic data, and you always manual review of the output is very important, so that you know that the output, the test data that you're getting, the scripts that you have do not contain any of the API keys, the password, etc. before you use it further. So unintentional data exposure you can avoid by reviewing and by using synthetic and anonymized data. Then if we talk about another risk, lack of control over data usage. Now Gen AI tools may store or process sensitive data without explicit consent, which causes potential for unauthorized access or misuse. For example, if the test data uploaded to a Gen AI tool is retained in logs, when say for example you are using the generative AI tool and in the prompt you upload the test data, you have the test data and you haven't anonymized the customer email or customer name, and you try to format that test data and you directly paste that test data, that gets stored into the test logs. Even if it is your on-prem model, or if it is cloud, it is even more worse, that whatever you type into the prompt that is over the cloud, it's gone into the public cloud. If you don't have opted for the private cloud, even if it is private, still it poses a lot of security risk when you expose this information over the chat. It's retained in the logs, and this sensitive information shared with external AI services without control. Because say for example you have shared that information with one of the model, that is the information that these models use to improve and retrain further whether on that data, the chat that you do, the prompt that you type is also a training data for the model. So making sure whatever you are typing in, whatever you are prompting is actually anonymized and with utmost care. That is the key to control lag or to have control over data usage. Now, mitigation for this is that you apply strict access controls, you ensure data governance policies are followed, and you prefer on-premise or secure AI environments for sensitive testing. When you have sensitive testing, making sure that you do not use the public generative AI tools that are available for the public. It has to be either on-premise, which has full control, or your organization has full control of that model and the data and the storage, where exactly that data and the chat information and the logs are being stored. Are they in the secure environment or private cloud? Okay, when we say private cloud, that data center, whatever information is stored there, no other organization or person has access to that apart from your organization. That's the mitigation strategy for lack of control over data usage. Now, the third risk is the compliance risk. So using generative AI without adhering to data protection regulation, for example, we have the GDPR. It can lead to legal disputes if you're not adhering to any of the regulations. For example, a country, US might have another regulation, UK might have another regulation, European Union has the GDPR, right? If your tool, when you're using generative AI, you are not adhering to any of these data protection regulations, you might end up in the legal disputes. If you are, say, for example, sharing PIIs with a Gen AI tool without anonymizing, it will lead to GDPR violation. You are not anonymizing the customer name, the email, etc., and you are sharing that information to a public generative AI tool. That will get stored into the log, and eventually it will get leaked further. That is the data that will be used for any other person who, say, for example, is fetching that information, and that is a high risk. And then using production data in testing without proper consent, that is another compliance risk. Do not use production data in testing without proper masking, without proper anonymization of that production data, and then making sure you also review that data before you actually use it. For security reasons, always recommended, do not use any of the sensitive information in the public generative AI tools or the models. Mitigation for the compliance risk: ensure compliance with GDPR, HIPAA, and any local regulations. Document data handling practices in test strategy. How your data handling will happen, or as a testing team, what will be your data handling strategy. Then train the test team about the legal and ethical responsibilities. What might happen, or up to what extent, what is the seriousness of the compliance if the customer information is leaked. That seriousness, the team member needs to understand. That training is very, very important before you start using any of the generative AI tools for the testing. How you have to use it, how you can avoid any of these risks, that training becomes really important. Then specific security risks. Infrastructure vulnerabilities, for example, LLM powered test systems can be target for data breaches or unauthorized access. So you have the test systems that might have the data breach or unauthorized access. Then manipulative attack, prompt injection or adversarial input, alter the AI behavior. Then you have the malicious input data. For example, attackers mislead LLM, compromise accuracy and security. So any of these security risks, the manipulative attack, the malicious input data, is possible in the generative AI models or in the LLM powered solutions. For example, a hacker might inject malicious prompt and AI reveals hidden system information. Malicious API request to generative AI generates incorrect test scripts. So that input data or manipulative attack, all of these LLM models are highly sensitive, and hacker can inject malicious prompt or script to fetch the sensitive information from the model. Mitigation strategy: regular security audit of the model, the Gen AI infrastructure, training the tester to recognize prompt injection attempt. In case the attempts are happening for the prompt injection, the tester should be aware of those patterns of prompt injection. Applying robust monitoring and anomaly detection, that's another mitigation strategy for security risks. Okay, so these are some of the risks and their mitigation strategies for generative AI usage in software testing. Thank you. I'll see you in the next tutorial.